Welcome to Confessions of a Parent Coach. I'm Coach, a mother of four, and potty talker, Ann Kaplan. This is the podcast where I confess something from my own parenting and coaching life, teach a lesson around it, and answer your questions. Even we parenting experts are far from perfect, and the real magic happens when we get down with all that imperfection. We get into the gritty side of parenting here, so earbud up and dive in.
Welcome in, listener, to another episode of the podcast. I am so excited to be back with you again this week to talk about parenting, bare my soul to you, share my share my shame, so to speak. Although I say that tongue in cheek because if you know me at all, you know how hard I work and how much I beat the drum of letting go of shame. So share my embarrassment maybe with you with my confession. And what I want to talk about this week is this concept of our kids being half baked. And you're going to understand what I mean as I keep going. But, I was actually thinking that a subtitle for this episode would basically be Time is Short. And I'll tell you what that means also as I keep going. What really inspired me to do this episode was a conversation that often keeps popping up in my group program. And yeah, a couple weeks ago, you might have heard me sort of tease that I've been running a pilot program of a dad's group. And I'm happy to say that the dad's group is going really well. If any of you have been kind of like, I remember the girls at my retreat this fall when I mentioned that I had just launched a pilot program of this dad's group for the rest of the weekend. People were coming to me going, tell me about this dad's group you mentioned. And I have a feeling that some of the dads who join this group over time are going to have been led there by their wise partners. But anyway, the dads group is going well and will be available for not the pilot program. The For Realsies prime time launch will be coming in January. And so stay tuned for that. And if you already know you're a heck yeah and you want to be in that group, reach out to me, get yourself on the waiting list. I definitely have some sweet deals for you by signing up early. But the reason why I bring that up is now going forward, when I say, oh, this great question arose in my group, you're going to have to wonder, was it the dad's group? Was it the mom's group? We're not sure. Well, this question did come from the mom's group. And it's a kind of question that I get all the time, also with my dads, also in the dads group. These kind of questions where it's like, this kid is, let's say, for example, 12 years old and they can't manage their homework. They constantly need me to like be keeping an eye on their schedule. They would forget their head if it wasn't attached, right? We hear that. And then I get the question, how is this kid ever going to be ready for high school? Or, in this case, with this particular mom, it was a younger kiddo who, same thing, like this kid drops his backpack on the floor the second he gets home from school. Every morning, it's like we play find the shoe. Like, how is this kid ever going to learn these life skills or whatever? And I think as our kids get closer and closer to the quote unquote finish line in terms of the time that they have with us, for most kids that's around age 18, we start getting more and more concerned. Like, this kid still has a very wonky moral compass. This kid still is kind of a mess. This kid's room is a disaster. Like, all of these things, like, this kid is not ready for life. This kid still hasn't figured this or that thing out. This kid still shows up totally, terribly in relationships and arguments and conflicts, like on and on and on. Now that I keep talking, I'm thinking of another mom in my mom's group who brought to the group a few months ago a fight that her daughter, who has already graduated high school and is in college, was in with her younger brother, who was, I think, a junior in high school. So these are like old kids, right? And they were being super petty with each other, villainizing each other, giving each other the silent treatment. And this mom was like, what is going on? This can't go on this way. And I'll say to you the same thing that I have said to clients over and over and over again over time. How will this child become an adult? How will this child learn how to be a 20, a 30-year-old person? they will become that person. They will grow into that person. What do I mean by that? What I mean is the truth is, and you can verify this by thinking about your own experience. If you go back and look at your life, I promise you it worked out this way too. When our kids leave us, when they're 18 years old, they are half baked at best. That is the best you can hope for. Were you a fully formed, functional adult by the time you were 18? If you were, you're the first I've ever heard of. We're not even supposed to be done developing our brains by the time we're 18. So, having this expectation of our kids being really ready to launch when they do launch is honestly laughable. Half baked is the best you can hope for. Okay. I sometimes will give clients who are like really worried, like that mom of the 12-year-old who is like, how is this kid ever going to do high school? It might seem like, well, it's just right around the corner. Yes. And there are parenting things we can do that I obviously help you do so that your child learns some skills and stuff like that. But what I also say is like, saying, how is this 12-year-old ever going to be ready for high school is like looking at a toddler and saying, look at this toddler. They can't even walk without falling over. How will they ever drive a car? Like, how they'll drive a car is by growing until they're 16. And by the time they're 16, theoretically, with most kids, they now have the mental capacity to do this thing that they didn't when they were younger. And that's the same thing with a 12-year-old. It's the same thing with these older young adult children who are fighting with each other and holding grudges and acting like children in their fight. They're acting like children in their fight because they're children, and they're not going to stay children. They won't be children forever. But it's okay that your kid is still a proto adult that is still half baked. And you will hear me say many times, half baked is the best we can get. Okay. And here's why I subtitle in my mind anyway this episode as time is short. Let me first start with my confession for you, and we'll go from there. So, my eldest son is actually in college. He is a freshman this year, and he was just so ready for college. He totally was. Like he had outgrown living with his parents. Watching him in his life at towards the end of his senior year was like watching a kid who was running around in pants that were 3 inches too short for him. Like he was too big and gangly and grown up for this life of reporting to his parents and having to check things out with us every time he made a decision and living at home with little children because he has siblings all the way down to the age of 9. He needed to leave. He was ready. And so when he left, in my mind, well, first of all, I felt really great. Like, okay, he's ready. This is great. We did it. We're at the finish line. And I really started to see him because he had outgrown and he was much too mature for this life of being a high school student or a high school age child. I really started to see him as a young adult, the young adult that he is, but also the young adult that I thought it meant when you're a young adult. And what do I mean by that? I had really unrealistic expectations of him. When he left, he was totally ready to leave. But just like every other kid who leaves the nest, he was half baked, and he still is because he's still only 18 years old. Um, he is half baked. So we had many instances where I was talking to him and relaying information to him the same as I would to a peer practically, and then getting really angry when he was not acting like a 44-year-old woman. Instead, he was acting like an 18-year-old. So a great example of this is we have here in Colorado, we have something called the Colorado Opportunity Fund, where if you are a Colorado native going to a Colorado school, you can submit to the state your information, and you actually receive money from the state to offset the cost of your college education. You need to apply for that. You need to submit paperwork. And once you do, it's all set and good to go. Well, y'all, it was not important to Elijah. That was not a priority of his. And it took us, it is now, I am recording this message in November. It is still November, and I still have not received our Colorado Opportunity Fund compensation. He finally got all of the paperwork done for it. And I really want to stress that it's not a lot of paperwork. He finally got it done like a week ago. And I was really angry with him because in my mind, it was the same as if I had like called one of my girlfriends who was the same age as me and the same maturity level of as me and asked her to, do this thing for me 3 months ago and she still hadn't done it. But Elijah is an 18-year-old child. He is not a middle-aged woman. And I had these really, really unrealistic expectations of him. And the worst part about having those unrealistic expectations is instead of appreciating the person he is now, and this is the trap we fall into when it's like, how is this kid ever going to be ready for high school? How is this kid ever going to manage himself on his own? All of these things is we're robbing ourselves of this precious moment that we have with our child. And here's where that whole time is short thing comes in, because if you think about it, and I want to preface this by saying, um, I recognize that what I'm doing right now is some wackadoodle math, but it's just useful to illustrate a point. So please do not hold me to any sort of like mathematical equation standard here. But if you think about it, any relationship that we're in, including a parent-child relationship, we are really only half the equation, right? We are co-creating that relationship with the other person. So we bring ourselves to this relationship, they bring themselves to the relationship, and the relationship is the product of those two halves. So let's just say we're only half of our relationship with our children, and they themselves are only half baked. They're only half of themselves, the person that they're going to become when they leave us. And then they go and complete that process away from us. So there's half of them that we had a contribution to, and half of them that is really out of our hands, and it's for them to figure out on their own. When you think about that, like our influence, our time, our impact on our children is so short. Our window of time to be that influence with them and to be contributing to them is so short. And our hold over them is not complete, nor should it be. I don't ever want you to think that any of these things I'm saying, God, what would be really great if we could just play our children like puppets. That's not what I'm saying. But when you think about it, this time with them is short and our influence on them is finite. And so the way we are with our kids, it stays with them forever. And also, it means so much because at some point that window closes and they're off to the races. And this whole time, while I was being so irritated with Elijah for like taking, way too long to submit this paperwork and needing me to set a boundary with him before he actually did it, and basically lamenting the fact that he wasn't a 40-year-old man yet, I was completely minimizing and diminishing the person that he is, which is an amazingly tremendous, wonderful young man. And he is that way because I have been doing this work on myself and bringing it to bear in my parenting since he was a year and a half old or less. So you think about it, it matters so much the way we are with our children. That's what stays with them forever. That's what's going to, even after they leave the nest, even after Elijah is, finishing baking himself, that's where my influence lasts. And unfortunately, the converse is true. If we don't pay attention to the way we are with our kids, if we don't do this work, that stuff that we kind of stuck in them when they were living at our home and that first half of their baking process, that also stays with them forever. And where we fall short, where we miss the mark, it leaves an indelible imprint on our children that we can't do anything about because once they're gone, they're out of our hands and that mark is inside of them. And in the only change that's possible for them around those things that we have left with them is for them to do. We can't change the past. We can't undo whatever mistakes we've made. So that time is short piece is huge. So we need to make the most of that time. And to me, making the most of that time is figuring out how to do this right. And I wish I could tell you how many people come to me now. Like, for example, my amazing assistant, Jody, who may be listening to this podcast right now. So I'm going to do a shout out to her. Shout out to Jody. Jody is an awesome mother. She's an awesome assistant, and she's also a grandmother now. And she has said so many times in helping me with my business how much she wishes that someone like me or me had been around when her kids were young. There's so much that she has said, like, wow, I never thought of it that way. Or I just learned something new just by like reading my blog posts because she has to make them into social media posts, or listening to my podcast because she is helping turn it into a podcast and not just a recording that I made on my computer. She's exposed to all of these concepts and ideas and skills that I teach you all. And she has said so many times, and she's not the only one. I hear about it constantly from older parents who say, they wish, gosh, I wish that I had had some of this support when my kids were young, either because my life was so much harder than it had to be because I was winging it and figuring it out on my own without any support, or because I can see now that I've made these mistakes, and now that's a lot to come back from. And if I maybe had known differently and had some support around it, I wouldn't have acted that way. And it's very fair for them to say that, because no matter how much we learn and grow after our kids are gone and show up differently in our relationship with them after our kids are gone, that impact that we leave on them in those formative 18 years is there forever. So I really encourage you today to do what I am doing now, and I wish I had been doing from the beginning with Elijah, this whole year, is to release the expectation that our children are going to be middle-aged adults by the time they're 18. Release that expectation for them to demonstrate to us when they're very, very young the capacity that they're going to have when they are older, and instead make the most of the time you have right now with your child by putting the focus on yourself and putting your energy into making sure that you are showing up in the way that is from your highest self and who your kid deserves and who your kid is going to thrive with having as a parent, and being present and appreciating the amazing, magical, beautiful creature that you have in front of you right now, instead of lamenting that they're not the person that they may become someday or you want them to become, or all of those things. Those two pieces of the puzzle, working on yourself and appreciating the person that you have in front of you, attuning to your child, those two things are profound, and I would say hallmarks, cornerstones, foundational elements of creating the positive parent-child relationship that you want to have. And let's face it, I talk to parents all the time who are like, I want my kid to want to come home for Christmas. I want to see my kid more than maybe once a year for the rest of my life. And the truth is that once they're gone, that's for them to choose. We have no control over that. And I think ultimately, in a really weird way, the thing we're really all trying to do as parents is raise kids that want to hang out with us when it's their choice, that they want to come back and be with us, not live their lives with us, not sacrifice their lives for us, but that we get to be a part of their lives. And the way that we show up when we have the chance in that short window of time, that's what determines that. And if this is feeling like, holy shit, I really need to take this seriously, hell yeah, you do. Of course we do. And you don't have to figure it out by yourself. And you're not supposed to know how to do this just naturally, instinctively. There's a reason why people like me exist. And I would be a very lonely and unsuccessful business person if there weren't a million people out there just like you who are ready to finally actually give themselves the support and guidance and tools and skills and knowledge that allow themselves to do this stuff that we're talking about. And if that sounds like you, it's time for us to meet. I want to meet you. I want to get to know you. I want to hear your story. I want to be a safe space for you to put it all out there and receive it with tons of compassion. And I want to give you my feedback and help you make something different happen in your life and in your relationship with your child. Set up that free discovery call you always hear me talking about, and we will go from there. Have a great week, everybody, and just be present with your kiddo. Bye.
The episode is over, but there's more waiting for you. You can grab my free workbook, Getting Kids to Listen the First Time, that walks you through the fundamental principles I teach all of my clients and applies them to this very universal parenting challenge. So if you're sick of repeating yourself all day long or just want to learn more about my style, you'll definitely want to go to bit.ly/kidswholisten. And if you're ready to work with me, let's meet. Set up a free call at bit.ly/Kaplan call, and let's create an action plan that gets you exactly where you want to go. And of course, links to all this goodness are in the show notes. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you next time.